Hello, everybody. So we're in week 7 now. Almost finished. It's getting close. First off, y'all, if you saw the announcement the other day on Sunday, I decided to drop one of the chapters that was on the schedule for this week. There was originally 2 chapters on the schedule this week. One of them was something I thought was very interesting, is why it was included. But then as this week finally got here, I thought, well, everybody's going to be overwhelmed, and I know they're busy with a lot of classes, so this one's not on our core objectives, so I'm just going to drop this. It was about actually using PHP to draw images. A lot of it was with the canvas tag in HTML. Oh, there's Nia. He is coming today. I didn't think he was going to be here. Hey, Nia. We were just getting started. If you need to leave whenever your appointment pops up, just go ahead and slip out, and then the recording will be there. We were just getting started. I was just letting everybody know that, well, when week 7 got here, I figured you all were all really busy. So one of the chapters that I'd included, that just because I thought it was interesting, I went ahead and dropped that. But it was about drawing with PHP, actually creating the image from scratch. It uses the canvas tag on HTML a lot, which we typically do with JavaScript. It's just an element where we use JavaScript and draw, right? Do pixel by pixel drawing or the equation sort of drawings. So we can draw lines and arcs, draw a bunch of shapes right there in the element, or we can load in like wavefront images and do 3D rendering right in Canvas element. It's all set up for it already. So I was going to include that, but then I was like, oh, everybody's going to be busy on week 7. And I know we got the projects in here, so might as well drop one of those chapters and extend the lab time this week. So hopefully give us a lot more time. I just realized right before we started, I forgot to upload the assignment. I'll do that here in a second. Because I mentioned the core objectives. I didn't mind dropping that chapter because I put it there because I thought it was really interesting. And at least see the basic concepts of it, but it's not one of our core objectives. So I wanted to look back at those. You might remember at the beginning of the semester, I mentioned that while this is loading, because obviously it always takes a while on Zoom call, I recently updated to the latest version of the Zoom app, and there are some neat features on there. There's some nice updates. I stumbled across one yesterday that I thought was really neat. I showed up for my 1 hour a week in the Virtual Student Success Center, the tutoring, and it's been kind of slow, so I brought my guitar in with me, thinking I wouldn't see too many people. And when I started playing the guitar, Zoom recognized that I was playing guitar and gave me different audio settings, like better audio settings with equalizers and stuff. I popped up a message like, oh, it sounds like you're playing music. And like I've had radio on in the background and stuff, and it didn't pick it up from the radio. But for some reason, when I was sitting there playing guitar, it actually recognized that I was playing guitar on Zoom call and gave me better audio settings to adjust my audio. I was like, that's a really neat update. So that's in the latest version. There's a lot of other things too. Something in the chat room. I play a lot of music. I've got the front room of my house. When you walk in the front doors, my instrument collection fills up a room. And stuff's just stacked up. Okay, so you might remember at the beginning of the class, when we were going over the syllabus, I pointed at a list on here and mentioned that it's a list that you will see in all of your classes. It's specific to the class, but it's called the course objectives. I can't remember what the R stands for right off the top of my head. It's probably listed on here. But in all of course outline of record. So it's the list of things we're supposed to be learning from a course. And near the end of the semester, you always want to look at this list and make sure you feel like
we're looking at HTML here, boss. 153.
This is the 253.
Okay, well, it says something about 153 somewhere in there.
Oh, I copy and paste syllabuses. I might have forgot one. Oh, yeah, I forgot to change the word copy and paste in the syllabus. Yes, this is the 253 course, though. I should have changed that.
It took us the whole 8 weeks to find it. Tells you how close we looked at this. Oh well.
Well, the list is correct because I see MySQL stuff on there, and we definitely didn't talk about MySQL in 153. So there's some different things. So server-side, script-side languages, the difference there. Just some notes about different design things. The textbook talks about those some. Syntax of PHP, we've definitely seen that this semester. The SQL database integration, we've been looking at that. We're going to look at that a little bit more today. Use PHP to generate HTML documents and then run them through the validator. I guess we haven't specifically looked at that, so we might as well look at that real quick. Does anybody remember the website for URL for the validator? Oh, here it is. The biggest thing is, well, it's just like the previous one, where you might remember in SDEV 153, we always upload our files to that. Since we're running PHP, the validator won't be able to check it from the file. So here you actually link to your page and let the validator contact, try to download the page so all the PHP runs over on the server because it can't run on the local client, and then it'll check the result of the PHP. There's a lot of stuff. We've seen it over and over again. There in our scripts, we build up strings of HTML code and then echo that back. So with the validator, you just need to make sure and pass in the address, not upload the files directly. Otherwise, it's exactly like we've seen before. Operators, arrays, control structures, a bunch of things that all the PHP language stuff. We saw that. Data input on forms, we've seen that, and working with the SQL database, we saw that. Working with relational databases, there's a lot of those. Our main examples being kind of a shopping cart example. That's a good standard way to see all this stuff in action. We've seen our queries, right? We just write the SQL query, which is sometimes a mess, especially on insert. And on Thursday, we'll see something a little bit nicer for that. It could be a bit of a mess, but we just put the query together and then just have the script pass it to the database. Conceptually, there's not much to it. We talked about get and post. They'll behave exactly the same. The biggest difference is that with the get stuff, we can see it in the address bar. We've looked at it at least once, I believe, where I think for Ajax, we did that. We put together a fake web form that would send the data, and then we used a get to send it, and then just copied and pasted to put the Ajax code together. So that's the biggest difference is we can see get the stuff moving through the network when we use get, but we cannot see it when we use post. So typically we use post because it's a little more secure. We saw about encrypting stuff. That was last week. We've done a whole bunch of debugging PHP. There's a lot of debugging PHP this semester. A little bit of debugging MySQL, but at least from looking at the assignments, it looked like everybody was feeling pretty comfortable with MySQL. So there probably wasn't as many error codes there. Sessions and cookies, we looked at that last week. Yeah, how to upload stuff to a server. And the course objective specifically said FTP or SSH. You might remember when we went over the AWS stuff, which I don't think anybody ended up using. We did talk about FTP and SSH. Those are the protocols for using that, but I think most people that ended up doing things online went with a domain host, where there's so much nicer tools than FTP and SSH. Because file transfer protocol and secure shell haven't changed since the 1980s or so. For as long as I've been around computers, those haven't changed. So since at least 1986, those have not changed. But it's yeah, there's much nicer tools that we looked at. We did see those. This one we haven't seen yet though. Import and export data to and from MySQL using a variety of formats. The CSV we haven't seen. That's comma separated variables. That's basically a text file where everything's just separated, delimited by commas. Typically it opens in spreadsheets anymore. We're going to look at that on Thursday. And the .SQL stuff, we're going to look at that as well. I wasn't exactly sure what they meant by this. Because doing that directly in the MySQL statement, that should have been covered in your DBMS 110 class. And doing it in PHP MyAdmin is just click the button that says import. Not much to that. So I was thinking maybe they want us to do that from a file upload on the page. So we're going to look at that Thursday. But it seems like we've been through everything on that list. There's a lot. It came quickly. Some of it probably flowed in and out really quick, as busy as you all were this semester. I haven't posted the assignment yet. I guess I could pull that up and show you what it is. Or I will post it right after class. I made a note to do that. All it is, I'll go ahead and tell you the storyline for it, because I added the storyline for Becky's Bakery. Becky got a new neighbor in the shopping center or whatever. And her new neighbors, there's a graphic artist department. So for side work for them, they're going, if people upload simple images, logos, things like that, some of the graphic artists that moved in next door to Becky said they can draw those logos in the icing and charge a little bit more for it. I just made up a number. I have no idea how much something like that would cost. So I said just add $6 to the order to keep the math easy for debugging. I'm pretty sure it would be more than that. But all we need to do is add something to the form to upload an image. It's very straightforward. We haven't really seen that yet though. And that's the last topic to kind of go over. We'll look, so the plan for today is we'll talk about the uploading and manipulating files. The textbook has a lot. It's near the end of the textbook though. So they went very, what's a good way to phrase this? They went very, very error handling happy. They went a little overboard with error handling. And some of their examples, it was almost hard to dig through the actual line about moving the files. And line, it's singular. It's a singular thing. So we're going to strip all that error handling out, which obviously is a great idea. So keep what the textbook has with all that error handling and checking, make sure you have the right type of file and it's within size limitations and all that stuff. But we're going to, for our class example, I'm going to strip it down and look at just the minimum part we need. But keep in mind that error handling is always a good idea. So the book has lots of error handling. I'm going to strip it down and look at just the line or a couple lines we need in order to do it. So today we're going to upload an image file, or we'll talk about it a little. Then we're going to, for an example, we're going to upload an image file, which is all you have to do for the homework. And we're going to do it two ways. One way, we're just going to make a folder on the server and upload the file, store the file in that folder like we normally would. And we're also going to look at storing it right in the database. Both of them are fairly straightforward. Then lots of lab time to work on projects and address questions, anything that, lots of time to work on things, get everything caught up today. And then on Thursday, well, there's two more examples. We're going to continue with uploading files and just use a upload a .sql file to create a database. And we'll also look at doing that right in the database, because normally we don't do that from the web page because it's not very secure. We don't want to give just any user on the internet access to upload a .sql file and create tables and do all sorts of stuff in our database. That could be a big security risk, right? So normally we don't do that because it's a little bit, it's not secure, but it's not hard. So we'll go ahead and look at it. Yeah. If the user knows how all our stuff's put together, they could pass in things and access our database, because the website has access to the database. So there's access to the database through the website. We'll also look at CSV files, which are much, much easier than insert queries. Those we do often set a place to upload because we're not creating tables or anything. We're just adding a bunch of data to our tables that exist. So that's the plan for this week. And then again, those two examples, and then lots and lots of lab time to get everything caught up. Does anybody have any questions before we start talking about stuff? And then, yeah, there's lots of lab time for the regular homework questions and stuff coming up here very shortly, because it won't take as long to talk about this.
What time does the library close at the school?
What day is it? Tuesday, I think Ed is, I think 5.
Okay.
I'm not positive. Check the tutoring schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany sent out an email yesterday that had the tutoring schedule for this week, and Ed is in the library. So IT help is in the library today, and it's open until he leaves.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Oops. Any other questions? Okay, so our topic for today is files. So you might remember earlier in the semester, we looked at file handlers. I'll make a note up here about that. File handlers. And the file handlers are what we would use to read and write. So we saw that earlier in the semester. What a file handler is sort of a connection to a file. We make a connection to that file, and then we either read what's in the file or we write new stuff to the file through that connection. This time, we're going to actually look at files, work with files. And hopefully the way I put these notes makes sense. So it, notice same level on a bulleted list. It's a completely separate thing. Working with files is completely different than working with file handlers. This is our normal stuff. So like upload files, and to download a file is just a link on the HTML page. I believe we looked at that in the SDEV 153. You probably should have seen it in the SDEV 153 for those who didn't take the class with me. But to download a file, we just set the hyperlink reference and an anchor tag to the file we want to download. And if the browsers don't consider it a security risk and can't open it on their own, it will automatically download. If not, the anchor tag has a Boolean attribute for download, which will just make the file automatically download when somebody clicks the link. Uploading is a little different. So working with files, we might need to upload files, move and copy. Move, copy, delete. That's most of our file operations, right? Once we have the file, we move it around, make copies of it, delete it. Once we have a copy, we can open up a file handler to it, read from it, write stuff from it. So this is our basic file operations. And all the stuff that's not text. All right, non-text. So like our example today, .ping files or .jpeg files or PDFs. I wrote a much longer list in my notes, but I didn't anticipate being at the bottom of the board there, so I'll shorten that. But ping files and JPEGs and PDFs. What we saw with file handlers, we definitely can't do anything with an image file, right? Or a PDF. We can't write to a PDF. We can read from a PDF with a file handler, but you have to know how a PDF is put together. There's some instruction lines at the top of the PDF that you have to read in and process through. It's not hard, but it's beyond the scope of this class. So we're going to take a PDF like an image is. We're going to think of it like a final image thing. Right? That's what we get when we scan stuff in. We usually treat PDFs like images. So let's ignore that point I just made. It's possible, but we're not going to cover it now. A little beyond the scope of this class. But we might want to do stuff with those files sometimes, especially the move them, copy them, sometimes delete them, but make copies of them on the server. That way they're not the user can upload them, like on a social media site, upload a profile picture, right? As the developers of a social media site, we don't have people's profile pictures to put in there already. We have to wait for the person to give us the profile picture. So that sort of thing. Sometimes files we actually want to send to our database. We'll see that on Thursday. So that's like the .SQL files and the .CSV files. The things we would upload from the import button in PHP-MyAdmin. Or we're going to see it Thursday, but you might remember in your MySQL class, the source queries or load data in file queries, those two things. We'll see that on Thursday. So to upload a file, it's really easy. So like we've seen in all our forms, we've put together a form, an HTML input tag with type equals file. And then we can just, that gives us something, it'll look real familiar when we see it. So the regular input tag, and we just have the attribute type equal to file. Then we want to give it a name and all those other things we've seen many times this semester. But put one of those in the form, and then we use PHP to move a copy to another folder for storage. Might have to create a file. mkdir. This is standard in most of our terminals and a lot of languages to just make a directory. Make directory if folder is needed. If we know some images are coming, we can go ahead and put an empty folder for them to go in when we get everything ready for the site. But we're going to go ahead and look at making a directory. So we'll create a folder and then just move that file from the HTML input element into that folder. Might have to read and carry out instructions in the file, such as like a .SQL file, what we're going to see on Thursday. Or pass it right onto the database like we'll do with CSV files. We'll see that on Thursday. And then for today, using a file input gives us a 2D array. So we get a two-dimensional array to work with. And you could probably almost guess the name of it right now if you haven't seen it. It's underscore files. The only thing that would probably stop you from guessing that is there is an S at the end. Those built-in arrays, sometimes they have S's, sometimes they don't. And then we have, I'm going to put name. I don't want to put name here. I'm going to put index, which would be the name attribute from that HTML input, just like we've seen. And then we have a second block for the second dimension of our thing, a 2D array, so we get a table, not just a list of elements. And I'm going to put property here for the generic thing. And here we have 2D arrays, so we're not getting a simple result from that input, right? Everything we've seen so far, we put like input type equals text, and then we get a string back, or input type equals number, and we get an integer or a floating point number, or input type equals color, and we get a hex color, which is it's not all primitive data, but it is very simple data. It's not a full table, right? So to get a table back, we have to tell our form that there's going to be a table passing through it, not just simple data. So in form element, we have, in the opening tag of the form, we have to add the attribute, and we have to tell it how the data we're sending with this form is encoded. So we add the attribute ink type, which is short for encoding type. So how are we encoding the data we're sending? And if we're using files as a table, it's always multi-parts, 2D array, multiple parts. It's got the rows and the columns. So multi-part, and we're getting those parts from form dash data. So we always have to set this attribute if we're going to work with files. And it's always exactly like that. It's a table, 2D array, so multiple parts, and it's coming from form data. So once you type it once, it's another one of those things, once you type it once, you can copy and paste it forever. Is it okay if I erase this side of the board? I need to put some
Yes.
the list of things we're actually going to reference here. So this is, yeah, we saw file handlers earlier, and this is our basic file operations, which is move and copy and delete are the main ones. The things we want to do with an entire file at once, and not just a text file.
What does that say on the bottom? ENC type? What is?
Yes.
Okay.
ENC type.
Okay.
It's an abbreviation for encoding type. Oops, I forgot my underscore. Then our files array it's a table. It has all these properties, right? The index is the name on our input. That'll be the rows in our table. And then the fields in those rows, the columns in those rows, we have a couple to work with. So the first one is name. And this is what a human called it. What human called it. So this is the name that a human put on that file. Right? If we made a well, I'm going to draw here in a few minutes when we get to our example. I'm going to draw a quick smiley face, just to have a ping image to upload, and probably just call it like smile.ping. So that's the name. That's what a human calls it. But humans and machines don't call things by the same names, right? So to work with it in our script, we might want that name so that when we make a copy on the other side, we can give it the same name, and that way people will recognize what it is. But to work with it, we need this one, temp underscore name. And it is TMP underscore name. That one always kind of aggravates me because that's not an abbreviation, that's a typo. There's a standard abbreviation for temporary, and it's not TMP. Right? I don't know how many times over the years I have tried to put an E in there and had to come back and fix it every place I used that, because that seems more like a typo than an abbreviation. But TMP underscore name. This is what the computer calls it. So when we browse for a file and hit upload, the server is going to be like, okay, there's a file, and it's going to refer to it by something. And this temp name attribute in our 2D array, this index in our 2D array, is what the computer calls it. So this is the copy of the file on the server we're actually working with. I'll put that. The copy on server. Until we rename it or something, until we give it a useful human name again. Those are the two we work with most often. There's also type. Which
So
is
would that be like an example of like on GitHub when they do the we had to do like the README, which was like a copy of the main index until no? Okay.
That's still a file.
Okay.
This we'll look at the name of, I'll go back to the name when we get to the example.
Okay.
So like that example I used, I said a human would call it like smile.ping. Right? That's a name. Draw a picture of a smiley face, give it that name, right? The computer is going to call it 10010001111011101.
Okay, I know what you mean. And so they
The
gives it a
computer
doc
doesn't-
number or any kind of document number. Okay. Or especially with the image and stuff. I've seen that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the computer is going to make up a name for it, a temporary name. We'd probably see it in Base64 encoding. So it would look something like A7, AB, 14B equals BZ, something like that. We'd have a bunch of Base64 encoding, which we are going to talk about Base64 encoding before today's out. So you'll know what that means when you see strings like that. But it's what the computer, how the computer recognizes that file. The type, this is the MIME type. We've talked about MIME types before. That's just a short description of what type of thing it is. We don't have to put the attribute anymore, but I usually do for the CSS files and say that the file coming from the server is CSS data written in text format. So we're like type equals text/CSS. So we have access to that. However, the computer guessed at this. Computer guessed. So be careful. It often gets it right anymore. Computers have gotten pretty good at at guessing the regular things, but a lot of your reference material, if you go look up examples on how to do this and stuff, a lot of people that have been doing it for a while will say just put up a little string parsing thing to figure out that extension yourself, and don't bother with the type, because the computer is guessing at it, so it might get it right, but it might not. Whereas if you actually parse through the string and check that extension to see if the file, the name, what a human called it, ends with .png or .pdf, you can be a lot more certain about what type of file it is. The two other things we have error. If something goes wrong, we get an integer here. So 0 is okay. Any error is int. So depending on what error happens, if it's a recognized error, there will be an integer in there. And then that's what all the stuff in the textbook was, like line after line after line after line of checking that errors index for what integer was in there to deal with it. So for our example here in class, just be aware that
I'm sorry, Chris. That says 0's okay, and then it says something errors. What does it say after the comma?
Any error gives us an integer.
Okay.
So 0, it's always going to be an integer. A 0 or a positive number. And if it's 0, then that means everything uploaded okay. If it's any other number, that corresponds to an error that it knows about.
Okay, and then you're going to show us to where to find what those errors mean.
The book is full of those.
Okay.
I was going to skip it and kind of clean it up because the book has so many of those that it is hard to follow their examples.
Okay.
Because to do the rest of this, we actually only need one line of code. And the book, all the examples in the book were like 30 or 40 lines long, just checking the errors. Okay. So I was going to strip those out of there and look at a cleaner example today. Okay. Look at the minimum part, but keep in mind that error handling is always a good idea. Size. And we also have the size, which is the size of the file that got uploaded in bytes. So if you want to know actually how many bits it is, you multiply that by 8, or if you're expecting files in megabytes, then this number is going to be up in the millions. If you're expecting files up in the gigabytes, this number will be up in the trillions. So whatever the size is, but it actually gives us the size of the file in bytes. These three are mostly used for error handling. The book had a whole bunch of examples checking those, or if you check the W3 Schools site for the standard reference material for web stuff, they have a bunch of lines doing that same thing with going over those numbers. If you're curious of what they are, you can just check the list there. The way the textbook had it, I thought it kind of made it hard to make sense of the concepts because there was so much error handling. So I was going to do our class example without that error handling, but that's there. And size, really, that's more of an error handling thing as well. We just want to, maybe if we're limited to 10 megabytes on our domain host, if our domain host limits us to 10 megabyte uploads, then we definitely want to make sure that the file being uploaded is smaller than 10,000 bytes. Otherwise, it's not going to upload. It'd be too big for it. So that's an error handling as well. And the type, again, the computer takes a guess at it, so be careful with it. That's just to check and make sure you have the right type of file. If you're expecting PDFs, make sure that it's a PDF file, or if you're expecting images, make sure it's a .png or a .jpeg or a .gif.
Can I ask you a question on that limitation? So if you have a file, but it's like you can upload up to 10,000 or something like that. What if you're under that? Does it slow down everything else? Like, would it be a better idea to not try to meet the max of it? Would it cause any problems by really barely being able to fit?
If it fits, it fits.
Okay. And it doesn't cause any other problems as far as like slowing down the program being too large?
No, that's why the server admin on your domain host would have limited it.
Okay. It knows what would keep it running smoothly.
Yeah.
Okay.
They say you can only have 10 megabytes because that's going to slow other stuff down.
Okay.
Or they'll, when you pay on free accounts, when you pay for your account, you probably they'll let you have a lot more size. And if you're paying for an account, they'll probably give you your own dedicated channel. But obviously it would technically it slows it down. If we add a bit, there's more stuff for the computer to do. So technically that's going to run slower. It's just we'd never notice the slower from 1 bit, right? But with your question there, Tiff, 10 megabits would definitely be noticeable. We'd probably notice a delay on it. That's a huge file. But it's just like when you download stuff, right? Have you ever downloaded a video? It usually takes a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what happens. It takes a minute to do it. As far as size limitations, that's on whoever's hosting the site. The server admin for the host can restrict those. Oh yeah, and with the checking the type, most reference material will just tell you you're better off to just grab the name as a string and check what is put in as the extension. Just manually check it yourself instead of having the computer guess at a MIME type. So really, these are the two we need most often. If we skip out the error handling, we just need the name and the temp name because, well, the temp name is the actual file. That's what the server knows about. That's what the server calls it. So that's the actual file. And the name is what humans call it. So if we're making a copy of it and putting it on the server for storage, we probably want a human to be able to recognize what file it is. So those are the two we'll use most often.
Okay, so the temp name, I was thinking it backwards. That's why I was saying it's a copy of it. So the temp name's what it's automatic. Like you said, the computer automatically names it. And then when we rename it or save it for whatever, then it's named. Okay.
Yeah, name is what it was called before hitting the upload button. Before we hit the submit button on our form, that's what a human called it. That's what file we said to upload. And then the server, when it recognizes it, it doesn't need a human readable name. A server needs a computer readable name to work with. So the computer gives it another name, which will be in binary code. When we get to the example, I'll make it a point to echo that back so we see what it looks like. And yeah, the first thing I always like to do is put those in useful names so that we're not working with the 2D array the whole time. But that's obviously we can work with it. And like I said, the book went very error handling happy with that chapter because it's at the end, one of the chapters at the end of the textbook, so they'd already covered tons and tons of error handling. All we actually need is a method called move uploaded file. I'll put that here. The only thing we actually need is this method move. I'm not going to have room there. Move uploaded file. And then I kind of ran out of room. Uploaded file will take in 2 arguments. It needs a parameter. It's expecting parameters for what file do we want to move, which is the temp name. We want to move the one the server knows about. So we use temp name there. And where do we want to send it? Then we just need a directory path. And oftentimes we have to make that directory path. And it is also best to put this in as a condition. So we do if move uploaded file, then that thing we've seen a few times. If that line runs successfully, that's the type of crew. If it doesn't run successfully, if it fails for some reason, then we'll jump over to an else block and handle the issue. That's the idea of what we're going to look at this week. Anybody have any questions about that? The concepts of it? It's fairly straightforward. If you've worked with moving files around in your any other programming courses, it'll be very similar to that. I doubt you all have worked with that much, have you? Did you all do that in the Python course, the SDEV 140 course, or the intro course? You would have used the sys library, usually sys.os and sys.os.path.
Well, I don't remember it.
Okay, yeah, so it's yeah, it usually doesn't show up in the intro course, so it's very similar. What we do in what we do today with the move uploaded file, you would do a similar thing in Python or in Java or whatever language you're working in with. It's very similar conceptually. We're just going to look at it in PHP today. So I guess we need to put together a form. And yeah, then that's all the assignment is this week, is add to the Becky Bakery assignment, and this will finish up the site, actually finish up that site because we're almost done with this semester. Just upload an image. Make a file to put it in and upload the image, and then put a link to that image in the database is what the instructions for the assignment are. It's very, very straightforward. So let's look at how to do this. Let's see, what time is it? 1:48. So I'm thinking we can put together an HTML form real quick, then take a break, and then do the PHP part. Does that work? Because HTML should go together quickly, right? So let's see, I'll run File Explorer and go ahead and go to this folder I'm going to work at. Step 253, class. And our class example has a lot going on. So why don't we do a simple one first, like we did with Ajax? Do a simple one that only does the one function first, and then come back and put it in the site. And that's something you'll often want to do when putting together projects as they start to get big and complex. Don't make a scratch one where you can try just one feature, a little script that only has the one feature you want, and debug it there, and then add it to your big thing. Because adding it directly into your big thing, it's easy to get lost. So yeah, we'll do that here, make a little scratch file, and then we'll add it to the index. We'll redo that on the actual class example here in just a moment. Afterwards, after we see the logic for it. I'm gonna make a new folder and call this images. And let's see, I'll just go to the address bar here. That way I'm in the right place. And Notepad++, and we need some sort of script. I'll do uploads.html. Yes, create it. I don't know why that kind of seemed to put those folders in an odd place. Better put them where I can get to both of them. There we go. So HTML files, we've seen that a few times, right? Should be straightforward, and you probably have like starter files for these already on your machine somewhere. And title, upload examples. So nothing too fancy yet. The stuff we saw the first day of SDEV 153, getting something set up. And this is just a scratch example to test the logic before we add it to that complicated example we've built up over this entire course. So we need a form to upload with. So form, method, I'll just use post, action, we'll need a script. I'll call this move.php. We'll just move it to a file on the server, make a copy of it basically. And then the thing that I put on the board, when we upload a file, we get a 2D array. So we have to specifically tell the computer that we're not passing simple data through here. So we need to add in the ink type attribute. Encoding type will be multi-part / form dash data. And anytime we need to upload a file, if we're going to actually, even if we're going to use the file upload button, we have to have that encoding type set. Then all we need is the input to upload it. So I'll put, actually, I'm not going to put any words on it so you can see what the basic one looks like. Input type equals file. Name equals, I'm going to use a picture for example, so I'm going to call this pic, but like always, the name attribute is our choice. It's relative to whatever we want to call it. The only exception is if we wanted to pass in an array of pictures. If we had a whole bunch of file uploads, we'd want to put some square brackets there. Whoops, that's not square brackets. We put some square brackets there, and then all of them would be name equals pic array, not pic as a single word. For this example, I'm just going to leave it as a single word. And well, I guess then we need the submit button. Input type equals submit. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that in the default form as well. So most of that stuff we've seen before. You may not have seen the file type inputs. It's one of them that's already included in HTML. And the only new thing is if you're going to upload a file, make sure you set the encoding type to be more than simple data, because a file is we get a table when we upload a file. Let's open this up and look at the form. So I'll go ahead and open the browser. Navigate to the localhost server. So if you're using your domain host, obviously get the file together, type the file up, then upload it, or use their editor to type it up. Either way, gives us the same results. But once it's on a server, we just navigate to where it's at. Class, and this was, images. Oh, is that what I called it? Yeah, okay. I guess I could have just looked through the blue link, the only one that hadn't been closed, hadn't been clicked yet. So there's our inputs in the default form. The choose file input just has this, tells us no files chosen. If we click on that, we get our normal browse to look for a file. I guess I should make a file real quick so that we see something, right? I'm just going to draw a smiley face. I'm sure I have an image on here somewhere I could use, but just to, it only takes a second to draw a smiley face. let's see, I'll put something with a yellow background. This way we'll have a file, so that'll work. And come over to the brush and give the smiley face some eyes. And there we go, that'll work. It doesn't have to be a nice picture for testing. Just need a picture. And I'll call this smiley.ping.
That's just about how I feel as a web development student right now with the little twitch in my eye.
Yeah, so that's what I called it. That's a meaningful name to a human, smiley. It doesn't mean anything to a computer. That's why we have to be careful. So then you can see when we click on it, we get that indication of what file is being uploaded. And then our script hasn't been created yet. So we need to go create the script. So all we had to do to get that added in there was that ink type attribute has to be multi-part form data. And then we just put an input with type equals file. I'll hit Control N and get a new PHP script. I think I called it move.php. I better check that. Okay, yes. I'm going to create the move.php script, which is a lot simpler than it looked in the book. Because the book would do tons and tons and tons of error handling. So first off, we need a place to put it. And to put it somewhere, we probably want to use a name. So first thing I'm going to do is grab that human readable name. So from our files array, we have what I call it? Oh, I called it pick. So this image pick, and then one of the things that came in that table is there's a name field for the picture we uploaded. So I'm just going to stick that someplace useful and then use that to create a path. And I'm going to put these someplace called images slash file name. I'll just put them in a file called images, which currently doesn't exist, right? If I go over to File Explorer, here's our working directory. We have the uploads.html and then that move.php script, but there's no folder called images. So we could create it here. I'm going to go ahead and throw the error messages, and then we'll come back and create the folder. So to move that, it's just that one method: move uploaded file, and then we can see from the little prediction thing here, we need the file we want to move. Then here we need the server, the name the server knows it by. We know it by this human readable name, which is called in the name index of, I guess I should say the name field of the table. But the server knows it by the name TMP underscore name. So temporary name, and then we'll put it at path, that path we created. So that's actually all we have to do. This is going to throw some error messages. I'm going to go ahead and run it though. And then we'll see the error messages and see how to deal with them. 2 o'clock. We'll take a break in a few minutes. We'll finish this one, and then we'll take a break. I just remembered I meant to take a break before starting the PHP part. I got all excited. I enjoy coding. So once again, I'm going to hit the choose file, select that, and then submit it. And then we get some error messages. In particular, no such file or directory on line 7. And here's that file. So temp name, the server knows it as this. It's in the XAMPP, a temporary folder on XAMPP, and it called it php.eccf.temp. So not exactly a complicated one for our server here, but it's still, if we saw the name of that file, we wouldn't have a clue that that's a picture of a smiley face, right? So that's what the server knows it by. So that's the one we want to work with. And it couldn't move it there because there's no directory listed on line 7. Line 7 says to go to path. So we have to make that directory. Again, all we have to do is just this function make dir, and I'm going to make an images folder. There's a little bit more that we really should do, but we'll see that here in just a second. Now when I hit reload, continue, those error messages went away. And if we come back over here, it created that images folder and put our smiley face in there. So that's all we really have to do to upload it. There's some more that we really should do though, because now if I hit submit again, we get this message. It already exists. So that should tell us immediately what needs to happen, right? We only want to call make directory if that directory doesn't exist. And like so many things in PHP, there's a function built in for us to use. So we'll put in an if statement, and the function is file exist. So if the file exists, it will return true. So I'm going to put not file exist, and then look for images. And it's a directory, so don't need any extension or anything. So
I was following up until the if not file exists. Could you explain that again?
okay, so this warning message says it crashed on that make directory line because there's already a directory called images. And we can't put two folders with the same name. They're next to each other. So we'd either have to give it a different name or not make it. So we only want to make that folder if it does not exist.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so this file exists images. If it exists, that will return true. So we want not that. So if not exist, then we'll make the directory. Now when we reload it, that error message went away, and we should have 2 copies of that now. Oh, we only have 1 copy, and that's because it overwrote the file. So has that human readable name in it. We grabbed the human readable name, put that there, and said, well, write that to images/file. So it just there was something with that name already, so it just overwrote it.
So then if we wanted to give them a choice of overwriting or not, we'd have another if statement by the move uploaded file.
If we want to give them the choice of overwriting or not,
yes, sir.
A lot of if statements. So you probably remember this, Joe. Remember back in around 1985, 86, we didn't get that choice. Right? Whenever we would do this, it would just automatically replace files. We never got that option.
Oh,
back
I
on
think
DOS machines.
I remember having a choice for a long time. So
the choice has been there for a while, but it took them a decade to get that choice in. It is a lot to get that choice in. So yeah, for our purposes here, just overwrite it, but you need a lot of if statements.
So you just can't look for the same name.
You can, but things start to fall apart. There's a lot of error handling and things like that.
Is that because of the temporary names?
Someplace in there. It is just an if else, but it's a really, really long if else. There's a lot of things we have to check.
What if you override it on accident? Can you recover the original?
Nope, it's gone.
Uh-oh, I do better make sure I really, really watch those files. Thank you.
Yeah, so like Joe said, if you want to put in if statements, it's a good idea. But there's, when you get started into that, right off the bat, it seems like, okay, compare the names, see if it's there. And then before long, you'll find there's other things to check that you have to check along the way. Because it's not always the name, right? Could we have two files called Smiley?
Maybe with different extensions, like one being a ping and one being a JPEG.
That would work. The computer would be able to tell them apart if they're different sizes and all sorts of things. So for the purposes of our class here, to avoid overcomplicating it, don't worry about the overwrite. Just go ahead and overwrite stuff. But if you want to, you can go ahead and start into it and see what you can get going with it. Because you can get started pretty quick, but there's some fine details in it that take a while that kind of overcomplicate the matter more than you would expect. And generally, just like we did here, it's a good idea to have something. So I tend to wrap that in an if statement to at least echo a message that it didn't work. Echo, it didn't go through. And then here, if it went through, well, I'm just going to put nothing else to do. If it went through, it's fine. We're done with that. Maybe we go back to the page we came from. Header location will be right back to where we just came from, which was uploads.html. So now when we upload an image, choose the image, submit that. And it came right back to the page and it should be on there. And just to thoroughly check, oops. I'm going to delete that folder and make sure it still recreates it if we don't have it. So the folder does not exist anymore. So if we choose the file, hit submit. It's on there. So it created the folder, did everything. I guess this is another thing I was thinking about, Joe. When we upload files, so here on my desktop, if I want to grab this image and hit Control C and come over here and paste it, then we get that message, right? So we're used to seeing that on the desktop. But what about when we upload files? We typically don't see that message when uploading, right?
There's some crazy thing called versioning, or I think at least on.
Yes, versioning is a little bit easier. That's what I was getting into. So we're not doing this locally, which usually we're not used to it. So that is a little bit easier. For versioning, it is just check if it exists, right? So if file exists, that whatever's in that path variable. If it does exist, then just path plus equals, I'll put a 1. But really, we would want to have a counter of that, right? It might not always, a 1 might already be there. We'd have some sort of numerical reference that we could refer to and just add on another number. So now if it exists, we'll just make a version 1. Maybe I should add _1, _v1 to reference versioning. That's a whole lot, that works a whole lot better than actually the confirm message. Because if you think about it, on websites, do you remember seeing that message very often when we upload stuff?
When I made that versioning thing on, I didn't notice. Of course, I might not have noticed that there was a 1 or 2 somewhere where I didn't recognize it.
Versioning is a whole lot easier because that is the simple if statement. That's the one where we just check if it exists. Because where the actual if I come back over here and hit paste, the part where this gets complicated is this. Okay. Maybe we do want to override it. Maybe it's like, oh, well, we didn't mean to. Maybe we need to compare what's in both of them. Or maybe we need more information. There's not more information in this.
Oh, that's where they give us the dates and the creation dates and the dates and the file size and all that garbage.
Yeah. So
now,
that stuff gets.
So now wait a minute. Let me ask you a question. Where do we find the creation date for that file in our? Do we find that anywhere in our files array?
Yeah, wherever. It depends on what you're on. It's probably an Apache thing. Most servers are going to. Apache is by far the most common server. So you would just do the normal Linux commands to get the type of the file. Go to the directory and hit ls-l, and it will print out all of the files, the permissions, how big they are, the dates, the types. So you just the normal operating system way to do it. So here, running it locally on Jamf, I can just hover over it and get that information. Or right-click and hit properties. I guess this has more information here on Windows, right? All of that stuff. So that comes from the operating system, which we have access to from the PHP. So we would just ask for that information. There are pre-built functions for it. I'm not sure what the pre-built function is off the top of my head, but file info PHP. Google knows. Path info. So we got to use the path info function to get that stuff, Joe. So that's what I was thinking of with confirmation messages. I hit paste here, then we have to decide whether we want to override it or change our minds or compare line by line of what we want of data in the new file versus the old file, and maybe update really that's the update button. We have to do all that stuff. But versioning's a little easier. So if you want to do something, maybe just version it. Add _1. And the way I did it here, it's just going to keep adding _1. So let me upload a couple real quick. So I submit one. It uploaded with no problem. If we come back over here, now we have Ping version 1, which you can see we probably should have done some string parsing there, right? That v1 probably should have gone before the .png. But we can keep doing that and get more versions. Choose file, upload that file again.
So the extension doesn't automatically always have to be at the end. Is that okay being .png underscore v1?
Extensions are arbitrary.
Okay. So it's just naming it. As long as we're saving it to the right file as the right type of document, that really doesn't have to be in the title of it, PNG. Okay.
No, the extension only tells the computer what to do with it. If I come over here and having the wrong extension on it, I just have to choose, means the human has to choose what software to open it with. Which it's not even going to show things. I can open it with Chrome. That'll work. You can see the image is still there. The extension just, the .png just tells the computer to open it with image software. It's completely arbitrary on the name. So maybe do some error handling or something to check that. I guess you might want to do a loop, right? In order to get a second one up there without overdoing it, we need a loop. But it's a lot easier to do versioning. I'm going to comment it out though. It's a lot easier to do versioning than confirmations on the override or updates or not overriding. Yeah, I'm going to try to strip down to just the basic one. And you saw it worked without the any if else there. It's just that function. But we probably want to at least put it in an if else statement so that we can react to things having the file or not. But all we really need is that one file or that one function, move uploaded file. And then temp name is the one we actually work with. And name is just the word of what we called it. So we probably want both of those. That way we can still call it the same thing on the other side and have a useful human readable name. And call it temp name. Any questions about that? You know what? The other thing we were going to look at today is only maybe 10 or 12 lines of code. So why don't we go ahead and look at that, and then instead of a break, we'll just go to lab time after that. We'll do a break and then lab time, because it's going to be a short, like I said, it's going to be a really short day. So a couple lines of code will be move very, very quickly. So we need to put this in the database. Is that okay with everybody? Or should we take a 10-minute break and then do the next part?
I think that works.
Okay. I heard one person say it's okay. And I'm going to assume the other feedback, I'm going to assume no feedback is good. No news is good news, right? So let's just go ahead and do this other one, which is basically the same thing. We just want to put it in the database instead of a folder. Because databases make great storage, much more organized storage than a folder. First thing we have to do is create a database though, but we know how to do that. I'm going to jump over to phpMyAdmin, localhost/phpMyAdmin. And I probably still have the database from when I was doing the test run the other day. Yep, I still do. So I'm going to delete the database from the test run and just make a new one. So let's see, drop database pick test. Oh, I can't get to my button. There it is. Okay, so I'm gonna create database, and I'm just gonna call it pick test. Recreating the exact same thing I just dropped because that was from my test run. So just a database to put this in, but if you're on a domain host where they create the databases and you just create the tables, obviously this step would be skipped. The next one's a little more important. We need to use that database, so I'm going to click on it. So here in PHP admin, it's important to always glance up at the breadcrumbs and make sure you're in the right spot. Oh, that's not the one I meant to click on. That one. Yeah, always glance up at the breadcrumbs, make sure you're working in the right spot. So under SQL, need to create a table. I'll call it picks. Think for about 3 seconds. Nothing comes to mind for a unique ID, so I'm just gonna throw a number in there. Pick ID, be an integer, primary key, auto increment. And then a place to put the data. So I'll call it pick. I'll pick as singular. So the pick field on the picks table. So I guess it wouldn't have been too hard to actually spell out pictures. So yeah. If you name things like what just flowed out of me there, and sometimes the same thing will be singular and plural in the same database, just maybe remember to take a second and commit to memory which ones are singular and which ones are plural. So pick field in picks database. What type? What would be our type here? Anybody have any thoughts? Any guesses?
This is where you were talking about in the beginning where you said input type and then equals. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, no, that was the input on that was our form input. We had a file input. So we're going to put image data into a database. What sort of field, what's our type going to be? Any thoughts?
The image?
We don't have an image.
No? Okay.
We don't have an image type. That is a good guess, though.
Like,
it'd be nice if it was. So, but let's start with that, Tim. Nobody else seems to have any guesses. So we have an image. There's not an image type in MySQL. But what is an image type? Well, to us, we just saw it a moment ago. That .png, that just tells the computer what software to open that with, right? If I overrode that and told it to open it with Chrome and it opened the image fine when there was a different extension there. So it's not the extension that matters. What matters is the data there, right? And well, it's computer data, which means it's binary. What was that, Joe?
I said binary, but just as you said it.
Yeah, it's in binary form.
Check them out.
So we do have binary. We have binary. We have var binary. And then we say how many bits we want.
Var binary? Is that like var car, but?
Yeah, just for binary data. But it only goes up to as big as var car. So it would only get as much as 255 characters, whatever 255 times 8 is. A picture is probably bigger than that, though, right? Picture's probably bigger. Oh, wait, no, it only goes up 255 bits. So if we know it's less than, not 255 bits, I can't remember the size limitation. I confused myself thinking about it. It doesn't get very big. If we know it's a small thing, like an ASCII code character, we can store it there. So we have that, but we might need something bigger. Have we seen anything we can store binary code in? Places to store binary code if we have lots of it, or if we don't know how big it's going to be. We saw that one, right?
See, I'm still not that familiar with the blob. But you said that was something we learned in DBMS 110. You said something about that holds arrays, right?
A blob is binary.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. I'm still not that comfortable with
Oh, okay. Yeah, blob stands for binary large object. So blob just holds lots of binary code. Whatever, we put arrays in it last time, but anything we do on a computer is binary, so we can put anything in a blob.
So we can put anything in a blob.
Yep. So if we don't have a type, that's why I asked that question earlier, expecting somebody to guess image type like you did, Tiv. We don't have that. If we don't have a type in MySQL, we stick it in a blob because we know it's binary.
So then
otherwise it wouldn't be on a computer.
So then we have to serialize and unserialize.
Not in this case. No, serialize and unserialize are specifically for arrays. We're just going to send the binary data right to this. So yeah, those things you all were mentioning, those were specific to what we did last time, and that was all for arrays. But everything on a computer is binary data, and we could have done it without serialize and unserialize. It's just it gets a little bit unpredictable. So that's the table for our test. We have some IDs, so we get all the functionality from the database, and then just a blob to put that in. And this is an even easier blob than the last one we worked with. So I'm going to make a new file here. And I'll call this movedb.php. And I'll use the same form to save us some time. So here, instead of calling move script, we'll call movedb. Oh, something in the chat room. Yeah, so we can use that same form because it's just uploading a file, which means we still have to have multi-part data. Only this time we're going to call this movedb script. And we need the data. It's going to a blob. We're just going to store it as binary, so we need to get that binary. So I'm going to call it pick data. And we can just read the data right from it. Files, pick, campaign. So I'm just going to say, get this stuff. Let's look at what this looks like. I go pick data. See what it gives it to us as. So choose the file. Same one again. Oh, wait, I got to hit reload. That got changed, didn't it? So choose the file. And that's what it looks like. The browser couldn't figure out what to do with it. It didn't have a clue what to do with it, right? Like, I see some Chinese characters down here, a whole bunch of completely unrecognized ones, some human characters. So it tried to do something. Like, well, there might be something or other there. There it is. I figured it would show up right somewhere. Right between that unknown character and the P, right there that I have highlighted on the screen. There's a quote mark, right? That one would give us a problem. That one might give us a problem. Because if the computer just looks at it, tries to figure out what it is, it's like, maybe it's Unicode, it's going to find quote marks in there. just by chance because we have lots and lots and lots of bits. So if we take all those bits and split them up, look at them 8 at a time, there's a good chance the Unicode value for a quotation mark is in there, which would mean something to the database. So we have to watch out for that one. So you remember one of those methods we saw last time, we called add slashes. And that puts in the escape sequences. Oops. I'll wrap all that. I'll wrap the file get contents, what's echoed back on the page right now, in add slashes. So we'll add in all the escape sequences for them.
One parentheses and one, you're not missing anything, or does it not matter because we're only in PHP? But if we take this to HTML, then we're going to have to do another parentheses and then another semicolon to use this.
No, it's the other way. If we take HTML and take it to PHP, we've got to start throwing in escape characters.
Yes.
Okay, opposite way. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, yeah, you're really, really quiet, Dev. I couldn't hear. I think I missed part of the question. Thank you, Joe. I wasn't sure what you were asking there, but that puts all the escape sequences in there so that if the computer randomly thinks there's quotation marks, it's gonna just put an escape sequence for that quotation mark, and we won't have to worry about that accident happening. Then we just write it right to our database. As we can see on that page there in the background, it's already in binary code. We don't have to do anything with it. We just connect to our database. So DB is a new MySQL. This is just a test one, so I'm just gonna go right in. Go into localhost with root, a blank password, and did I call that pick test or test pick? Does anybody remember? I might have to go check.
Pick test.
Pick test. Okay. Oops. So we're going to open the database pick test, and then go ahead and write insert query, which this one won't be as bad as the ones the other day. So we probably could type it right in the query thing. We didn't see that. So I'm going to do that here, because this query will be a lot better than the ones we saw the other day. DB runs the query method, and then instead of creating the string first, I'm just going to create it right here. Insert into picks, the pick field, the values, some quote marks, close that, then get the semicolon and end the string. So instead of creating the string elsewhere, I'm just going to create it right here. And then what I want to pass in is what's in this variable right here. And I like to put those things from the arrays into variables so that we get that nice, the nice effect of a loosely coupled language where we can just put it right in the string instead of breaking out of there and typing in the array and all that. So a much easier insert query. Sometimes they're easy. So that'll run it. And then we can close the database. And I'm going to echo something this time. Echo, it should be there. Because when it went back to the other page, I couldn't really, it didn't look like anything changed. So see, there's not much to that one. Just insert, take the data, and we're grabbing all the contents from the data, which it's a computer file, so it's in binary code. We're going to leave it in binary code, and we just add the add slashes just in case the computer thinks it sees a quote mark there. We know it's not a quote mark, but the computer won't know that. It's going to take a guess at what's in that file, and computers always guess Unicode first. sorry, in PHP, all three of these languages, HTML, PHP, and MySQL will guess Unicode first. So moving it, we created a file, move it over to it, put it in a database. We just grab what's in the file, add flashes to it, and throw that in an insert query. So now if we go back, oh, it's still there, so it submits. It should be there. So I come over here and reload the table. There we go. Oh, we got 6.9 kilobytes of binary data. Does that help to make sense what a blob is a little bit better that way than the first example? So yeah, the first time we put an array in there, it was still somewhat readable. That serialized just left the array in human readable form. Serialized took that binary data and left it in a somewhat human readable form still, so we could write it to text files and things like that. And then we put that in the database so that we could still read it if we wanted to. Here, well, this just says we got a blob. Real quick, I'm going to pull up, I'll just go in MySQL. I have it shortcutted on my computer. So I don't have to go to the file where it's at or anything. Like I went ahead and set up an environment.
What did you say you have shortcutted? What do you have shortcutted?
MySQL. Yeah, so I don't have to go look for it. I don't have to go look for that folder like we did the other day in class. Actually, I had to turn it off on that computer for that day we did it in class. So just typing MySQL on your computer probably won't work unless you have that set up. So I was just going to pull this up, but probably don't want to use the command prompt anyway. So use pick test, select pick from picks. We only have one there. So there's what it looks like in the database. And you can see, just like on that web page, MySQL tried to guess what it was and like, oh, well, maybe it's Unicode, and got some stuff out of Unicode. If we look at how a PNG file is encoded, that's beyond the scope of this class, but it does say it's a PNG file on the first line, so it did recognize PNG, but that's about all it recognized from there. Oh, there's RGB. Everything else, I think, is just nonsense. So we need a way to get that nonsense back, don't we? I'll close out those. And to do that is essentially the same thing. I'll just do it right underneath this because we saw that that's going to work. So I'm going to put it right underneath this. I'll echo a couple break lines or break tags. So it's spaced out, and then make a new database object. DB equals connecting to the same database because it is closed, so we no longer have that connection. Just to does that make sense to everybody? Normally we would see this in another script or something. It seemed like a good place to put it because we're already finished. We know it inserts, so now we can see the other way. We need to get that back, which we've seen before. We just need a select query, which will be an easy one. So I'll just write it right in there again because we did not see that method the other day where it's built up complicated strings and pass those in. But we can pass it right into that query method. Can't seem to type. My fingers are in the wrong spot or something. So in the query method, I'm just going to write select pick from picks. So we're just going to select all of them, any pictures that are there. And then just like we saw before, if the results of that query, well, one of the things about the results is it adds a number of rows to it. Hopefully more than 0, meaning we found something, right? It could be 0, in which case we didn't find anything, and we'll just skip all this. But hopefully it's more than 0. And if it is, well, let's try to take whatever's in that result and fetch it as an associative array. And then we'll stick that in this variable called row. And as long as that line doesn't cause us to crash, it's going to go into a while loop. And when that line doesn't work,
after the fetch associate, you said it an array, associative array. Okay.
Fetch that's a function. So we just need parentheses for normal function notation.
Okay.
And it's already built into that results object. And we're going to take that, and I've been meaning to point this out. So we actually grab that first and then put that in row, right? Which means we are reading this code we're writing. It does not go left to right. This code goes right to left. So always make that point about jumping out of order. Don't try to start at the top and just go straight across and down the page. Because we can see from this line right here, or our standard one, right? X equals whatever it was in X plus 5 more, sort of a standard line. The code works from right to left, not left to right. So when you try to go through code left to right, top to bottom, that's not the right order for it. It doesn't even work that way when we put it together, because we're going to do this and then do this part. So we're actually working right to left in those instructions we put in. Just wanted to express that point again. You've heard me say it a few times. Well, then all we got to do is echo that back. I need a place to put it. So somewhere up here, I'm going to create a variable called HTML that has a blank string. And after I grab all the results, I'm going to echo back whatever ends up in that string. Then on each pass through the while loop, I'm just going to concatenate assignment. So add some stuff to that string, and I'll add a paragraph tag, an image tag. The source is going to equal something. We'll have escape sequences. And this is what's different. Everything we've seen before, everything there should look familiar, right? Connect to the database, do a select all query, cycle through those results. We get down here to the image tag.
The slash on there, the escape sequence is saying that it's going to equal something. Something will go there.
Oh, no, that's just saying there's a quote mark there. The escape sequence, quote marks mean something in PHP. If I don't have an escape sequence.
Because we were already going to have a quote mark there anyway. So since we can't put another quote mark. Okay, got it.
Yes, we have to have a quote mark there. So we have to escape out of PHP coding, put a quote mark there, and then come back to PHP coding. We always put something in the source attribute. And this is what's different, because before we would just refer to a file, right? But we don't have a file to refer to. We have a bunch of binary code in our database. So this will be a line you can copy and paste. So we don't have a file to refer to. We're going to straight refer to data. And that data, well, it's an image file. In particular, it's stored in PNG format. So we'll put in the MIME type, image data / PNG, then a semicolon, and then we're going to say Base64. We're going to use Base64 encoding. So you may not have seen this before, or you've probably seen it and just not known what it was. We've seen hex where we can have extra symbols and work with basically 4 bits at a time, right? Binary is too complicated for humans to work with. We need more than ones and zeros. all of our symbols are just stored in ASCII and then Unicode. You'll learn that in the SDEV 120 class. Hex, we can expand numbers a little and see that, but we can define that any way we want. So Base64 is a common one. We need a lot of symbols to store binary data. If we just want to keep it in binary data, we don't want to see ones and zeros. So 64 characters. It's a good computer number. Can we come up with 64 symbols? And well, we have 10 digits. Well, we always start with our digits because we're with numbers, right? There's 10. Well, then we have the alphabet, 26 letters, but we have uppercase and lowercase letters. So 2 times 26 is 52, plus our 10 digits, that's 62. So we're only 2 symbols away from having 64 symbols to encode our binary format. So that's why that's kind of become a standard. We're going to write it in Base64, then a comma, and then the thing we want in Base64 encoding. So this time I have to break out of that PHP code and concatenate things in. I have to stop the PHP code and bring in that row, the pick data we have in the row. But we want to make sure it is the type of encoding we just said. So we're going to put in this function Base64 underscore encode that row variable. Is my word wrap on? Pictures are in my way. There we go. I think I have word wrap on. Yeah, so it went down to the next line. I put a line break there to make that easier to see. So, well, I don't want to do that. Maybe I'll just turn word wrap off and scroll over. Yeah, it'll all fit there. So that's our data. Then we go back into the string and finish our tag. And that's where we, that's where we use escape sequences div. So like over here, we have to have a quote mark.
I gotcha. Thank you.
And here we're actually the quotes for the PHP. Oh, I guess we need one more quote mark over here, because that's our source attribute. So instead of the source being a file, the source is raw data, MIME type of image/PNG for the MIME type on that data. And in particular, we're going to put it in Base64 encoding, and we're going to grab what the database has and run that through a Base64 encoding function to make sure it matches. A copy and paste thing, but does all that make sense? Any logic issues people heard there? Yeah, and then we just add it to a string and echo the string back to the page so we can see it on the page. So if I come over here and go back, and I'll upload the file again, but I think now that means there's going to be 2 of them in the database, right?
So let
Which
me
won't
get this
hurt.
straight. All this is to add an image or a file directly to the server where we're not going to have to use an anchor href, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, this was just to store it in a database instead of a file, so that we can get all the benefits of MySQL with our image data as well. So if I submit this, I got a typo in there somewhere. Unexpected semicolon. Where was that at? On line 14. Oh, whoops. On the select query, that semicolon was supposed to go inside the string, not outside of it. Let me try that again. Reload. Continue. There we go. So you see that echo that came back. We grabbed the stuff out of the database, which this one just put another copy in the database. And then instead of having a file to refer to as our source, we just referred to the raw data that we put in the database. And then we get all the benefits of MySQL for working with that data. the speed and the precision that comes with pulling up those things instead of looking through lots and lots and lots of files and folders for a particular piece of data.
And it let us have 2 of them.
Yes. And if I do that again, it'll do a third one. If I hit reload, I think we're going to end up with a third one. Yeah. So it'll just keep putting that same one in, but there are more rows in it loaded them in the database. So if I come over here and reload that page.
That's right.
Now we have,
because that ID is what's making them separate. So you can have the same picture 95 times.
yeah. I could have just done ID equals 1. And now if we look at our source code, view page source, there's that echo at the beginning, and then there's Base64 encoding. So you've probably seen it before. So source is data, image, it's raw data, image type in PNG format, and it's Base64 encoded, and here's the Base64 encoding. And then that one ends there. So yeah, then.
Oh, that is the image?
Yes. And I pointed at the letters, right? So I said we had 10 digits plus lowercase and uppercase letters, 52. So 10 plus 52 gives us 62. We still need 2 more symbols for 64 symbols, right? And we'll see right here, there's an equal sign. And right over here is a plus sign. So that's our other 2 symbols. Digits, all uppercase letters, then all the lowercase letters, and then I think equals first. I think it's equals plus. I can't remember which order they go in, but the last 2 are equals and plus. But the point of, you can always look that up if you need that exactly. That took a little longer than I intended, but does that conceptually all make sense? We just stored it as raw data and brought it back as raw data instead of saving the file. Or well, we can just move the file around what we saw at first. Any questions about that stuff? If not, that was it for today. I thought it would be finished. I thought it would be finished quicker than that, but there's still almost 2 hours of lab time to work on projects and homework and give this a try. I realized right as class started, I forgot to upload the instructions for the assignment, but this one right here is the instructions for the assignment. Just add an image file and actually put it in a file. You don't have to put it in a database. Or I just said add an image file. If you want to put it in a database, you can do it that way. Either way works, as long as the image file gets added to the order. I will put those instructions up here in just a moment. Otherwise, if there was no questions, that was going to be it for today. And I will see you all on Thursday, which will be another very short day. And the concepts for that stuff will go a little quicker. And as always, I will be right by my computer until 4:50. So if you have any questions, Ivy Learn messages and text messages make noise on my phone, and I can be back on here in a couple seconds time to help out. So I will see you all on Thursday.
Okay, I think I know I need a break. You probably need one too.